So what is the state of the Russo-Ukrainian war? It is the 24th of November, 2024. It is over 1,000 days since Russia's extended invasion, which started on 24th of February 2022. The war itself dates back to 2014. And where are we at? If you're new to the channel, I'm Connor Klein. I'm an expert in international relations and the Russo-Ukrainian war. Speak both Russian and Ukrainian. Have been living in Ukraine for a few years before the 2022 invasion. And I'm here to give you a more insightful and unique perspective on the events of the war. So basically, to keep this relatively short and brief, it's evolved or devolved into a war of attrition. And there are three, I actually made a video about a week ago about how Russia needs to solve three problems in 2025. And it all basically comes down to the fact that this is a war of attrition, not a war of maneuver. So it's not like there's going to be some stunning breakthrough unless the opponent is successfully attrited in terms of their strength prior to such a breakthrough. So it's not that's why we haven't seen the sweeping changes in territorial control that we saw at the beginning of the war, beginning of the invasion, when Russia first invaded in February 2022. So they gained a lot of ground in February and March 2022, and then Ukraine took back a significant amount of territory that autumn in Kherson and the Kharkiv Oblast. There have not been those kind of gains since then. And the three factors basically are manpower, money, and material. Both sides are struggling in terms of manpower. We see that the North Koreans have sent Russia 10,000 soldiers as a stopgap, but they probably would need to send 10,000 a month to make a significant dent in their manpower crisis. Russia's losing in terms of missing in action, killed in action, wounded action, estimated close to now 40,000 soldiers per month. They can recruit somewhere between 20 to 30,000. That is the estimate that we have. So that's a shortfall. And that shortfall will eventually become critical. On the Ukrainian side, Ukraine's effort to conscript to this stage of the war have been, well, I wouldn't say unsuccessful, but they've been difficult. The Ukrainians who want to fight in the war voluntarily, presumably most of them have done so already, as we're over 1,000 days since the 2022 invasion, and those who are being mobilized are not as willing to go as those volunteers. Kind of logical. In general, it's estimated that Russia loses about 2.5 to 3 soldiers for every Ukrainian soldier. So even though Russia has a big population advantage, that doesn't automatically translate into voluntary soldiers. They are offering extraordinary signing on bonuses, salaries, and debt payments to encourage Russians to join, with a very, a lot of success up until now. They have recruited widely from prisons. People get out of prison and presumably have the rest of their sentence can be exonerated. Well, not exonerated. They don't have to serve the rest of their sentence. Commuted, I guess, is the term of art. As a result, but they have blown through their prison population. I think they're almost down to 100,000 prisoners in Russia. Somewhere between 200 and 300,000 before 2022. So it's a huge number of people, and they are finding it difficult to continue to generate enough manpower without having to go to a mobilization themselves. That was deeply unpopular when they had a partial mobilization back in the early autumn of 2022. They mobilized 300,000 men. However, over 1 million Russians, mainly men, left as a result. They tend to be better educated and more productive members of society. So it is not just that they take 300,000 or 500,000 men to mobilize, it's also that they will probably see increased immigration out of the country. So they would actually lose a lot of that valuable resource. In terms of money, the Russian economy is in a lot of difficulty. They have built up, I should make probably next week a video on the financial situation for Russia with a lot of stats. they are struggling because they built up a big war chest and they've blown through most of that. They left half of it in Western banks. So, and the price of oil and the resource that Russia sell is not rock bottom, but it's also not super high. And their economy shows a lot of signs of overheating. Inflation is the cost of living crisis. If people didn't have it bad in Western Europe and America, Russia, it is starting to get pretty bad. A lot of staples have gone up in the last 2 years, about 50%, and that is likely to increase. The interest rate is about at 21% at this stage. Official inflation is 8%, but this is not based most likely on anything to do with reality, and the real inflation is probably closer to the interest rate, probably in the high teens at the moment, but it will only accelerate in 2025, and they're spending 40% of the state budget on the war and on internal security, and basically they will have to have some sort of cutbacks in order to, or increase taxes. They've already increased some taxes in Russia, so they're going to be struggling financially. Of course, there are solutions to that. Maybe China is going to build them out in exchange for something. Ukraine, on the other hand, it is largely dependent on its allies for sustaining its economy and the war effort. So Ukraine will, and most of that money comes to the European Union. So unless that changes dramatically, which there's still not much evidence that Europe will abandon Ukraine, there is of course risk that the United States will under Donald Trump when he takes power in the second half of January, but we're not, we can't say for certain that's going to happen, but it is a highly possible event. Ukraine can keep going, but it will be more difficult, both financially and in terms of the third point, which is materiel. Ukraine gets a significant part of its weapons from its allies, however, it is increasing domestic production. And Russia has been largely dependent on refurbishing its Soviet-era stock of artillery, tanks, and other munitions. They actually also receive a large number of artillery shells from North Korea. I think it's something like 30-35% of their shells. Plus they get the drones from Iran, or they got the technology to build them in Russia from Iran, but Iran still supplies that. And on top of it, other missile systems. China does not directly send military equipment, but does send dual use and material, I guess, in the form of supplies that can be then used to construct the military equipment that Russia needs. So in terms of this, Russia is actually struggling in terms of producing the new equipment itself. It obviously has a monetary fiscal problem. It is running out of money. So the ability then to procure equipment that they to replace and to grow their military base in light of their enormous losses on the front is going to become extremely difficult sometime towards the end of 2025. Ukraine, as long as its Western allies don't abandon it, and of course that is in question with Donald Trump, will have solutions to material and to money. So that probably puts them in a slightly stronger position going into 25. Manpower is the real crisis. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, is on the way out, criticized Ukraine for not mobilizing more. Counter argument would be that if the US supplied more weapons to Ukraine, then Ukraine wouldn't need to replace as many fallen soldiers as they have. So going into 2025, the real unknown at the moment is what is new US President Donald Trump going to do? Is he going to back Ukraine ultimately after he attempts to get a quick cessation of hostilities? That is, in my estimation, of several videos about it on the channel, unlikely to succeed. Probability is very low that a deal for cessation of hostilities that would be attractive to Russia would also be attractive to Ukraine. It's probably going to favor one side or the other, and the other side will reject it. But we will have to wait and see what he does in practice when he takes over. He may decide to cut off all aid to Ukraine. This will undermine Ukraine and its war effort, its defense effort, but it will not probably become critical in the short to medium term. So that's just my short overview of where we stand in the war of attrition, the most likely event is that Ukraine will ultimately, most likely outcome is that Ukraine will ultimately prevail, although if the Trump administration does cut off aid ultimately, then it will take a lot longer and it will be a lot more bloody and a lot more destructive before we come to that final conclusion. That is the highest likely outcome. Of course, it's not a certainty, and Vladimir Putin, one would assume, still believes that he can have a complete victory over Ukraine and take back control of it all, and then presumably move on to invading other countries and re-establishing a wider extent of the Russian Empire. So that's just a brief overview where I think things are right now. If you have any questions, just write them down below. As this is a new channel, obviously not so many people are subscribed so far, but as you've seen, I've started to increase the content over the last 2 weeks, and now in terms of viewership, the channel is starting to get some traction. So I'm going to that continue going into the next few weeks. Just wanted to do something different today and have a live stream and see if I can answer any of your questions. So feel free to write down below any questions. I have a background in international relations with a specialization in the region being afflicted by the Russo-Ukrainian War, which is the largest war in Europe since World War II. And I also speak Ukrainian Russian and have been based in Ukraine for the entire period before the war during COVID. So it was like over 2 years, and on and off since then and before. So I'll just give it another 30 seconds. If anyone has a question, please type it in the comments down below this live stream, and I will refer to it. Got a little bit of weak voice today. I was out enjoying the weekend, but you know, it's Sunday, so now time to look after myself and do some good sport next week. And we'll have a video possibly every day, at least 6 days of videos, maybe a live stream on the Sunday. That is what I'm thinking going forward. So I will call it an evening at that. If you're watching this in replay, please drop your questions down below and your comments about where you think the Russo-Ukrainian war is at this juncture. And tomorrow I'll be back with another video. Ciao, ciao. Do побачення. I have some Ukrainian t-shirt here. Хусі. And Slava Ukraini. До перемоги.